All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the IU Academy YouTube channel. And today we are here with Cindy Tadje, a student and friend and generally amazing person who has been with me and studying at IU Academy for about 5 years now. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jess. Super
Thank
excited
you.
about having this long overdue conversation that we've wanted to do for quite some time.
We are finally just hitting the record button.
Exactly. I know. It's like trying to get the timing right.
We've been having these conversations for years at this point, and you've had a front row seat for experiencing Ayurveda, not only for yourself, but for your family. And I think you've had you've got a great understanding of just how effective it can be, and also very difficult past and history that you struggled, I think, trying to find the right help with over time. And so I'm, number one, glad and so happy that this has worked for you. You found something that is working and helping you move forward. And I was thinking that today we could just go through some of this and let people understand that Ayurveda is out there and can be helpful in all kinds of different situations, and learn a little bit about how it's helped you.
I love it. I love it. Let's jump in. Let's do this.
Awesome.
I know. I remember when I met you, I remember I was, because I've studied health, nutrition, exercise for 2 decades and have always been searching for, the right way. And when I remember calling around a bunch of different Ayurvedic schools, and I got a hold of you and you called me back, and it was like this connection. It was like all the stars aligned, and it was magical, and just your expertise and your knowledge, it was amazing. So that was huge. That was huge finding you, because I don't think I would have jumped into Ayurveda if I didn't. And yeah, I feel like it saved my life. I feel like you saved my life, Jess. Thank you. Actually, I know you did. I would be in the loony bin for sure. And I'd probably have like multiple surgeries by now and be on a lot of medications that would have a lot of side effects. So I'm very grateful that we did meet when we did. It came at a most beautiful time.
And we were very lucky to come together, that's for sure, because you were there for me just as much and seemed to have a very special connection and sense of what was going on at certain times. So I appreciate you being there.
It's been a ride for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think has been the most powerful part of learning Ayurveda for you? Has it been like the in-depth education of it, or the daily practice, or something else?
Well, let's see. Do you want me to go back? Should we rewind a little bit and tell you a little bit about my story? A little bit about how I even found Ayurveda?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I've spent a lifetime not feeling well. It started when I was a teenager. I suffered from stomach aches, chronic stomach aches. Always was bloated, felt like pins and needles were in my belly. Going to multiple doctors, I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome at the ripe age of, I think I was 17. And I got a colonoscopy, my first one, at 18 or 19. And it was very disheartening, because at the end of the day, they just gave me a label of irritable bowel. And I think they gave me like some Prilosec or something to do with heartburn. I don't know. Had nothing to do with the actual problem, and it didn't help. And so I remember at the time I had a neighbor who owned a health food store. And so she came and talked to me and kind of set me on this path of holistic health. And I started to study all sorts of different things about, mostly one of the things was aspartame. And I just remember kind of diving into understanding aspartame and the different effects that it had on the body. And so I kind of started to cut out and eliminate certain things out of my diet that were kind of talked about a lot in the holistic world. And so at the time, I got married when I was 19. I grew up as a Mormon, or I don't know if that's like a great terminology. They refer to it as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it's Mormon. And so I got married at 19. I have a great husband. So grateful that we did get married, even though we were super young. But I wanted to go down the medical route. And so I set off to study exercise physiology with a pre-med major, because I knew I wanted to study some type of medicine, but I also saw this holistic side. I was like, wait a second, like I see the good in both of them, but I kept leaning towards more of a holistic lifestyle. So I started to study, and I almost graduated with my bachelor's degree, and then I started having some kids. And then my husband's job started getting us to travel around the United States. So my education got put on hold, and I had 4 kids. And during this time, my health was always a struggle. So I always was struggling with digestive problems. I had thyroid problems. I had lots of fatigue. I also had an eating disorder. And my eating disorder started when I was around 18, 19 years old. And it was one of those ones that kind of like went under the radar. And something I struggled with until I met you. You really were the one that kind of finally like nipped that one. So I struggled with a lot of body shame, a lot of low self-worth, low self-esteem. And I didn't quite understand where all these deep-rooted feelings were coming from. Because I had a healthy marriage. Me and my husband we get along really well, and we've had a really healthy relationship. And so I had all these really deep-seated feelings of low self-worth, a lot of underlying depression, and a lot of anxiety. I started having panic attacks that were coming out of nowhere. And as my panic attacks increased, so did the decline of my health. And not recognizing, this was like a decade ago. So there wasn't a lot of information about the connection of trauma and how it affects your biology. So I hadn't dove into that realm yet. I continued to just raise my kids, eat as healthy as I could. I studied a lot. I was always like, what's the latest, greatest new thing about alternative health? Always eating whole. I tried the raw food. I tried to be a raw foodist for a while. And you can imagine what that did to my body. I know you're shaking your head. I just remember I was like trying to sprout my own sprouts. And I think I food poisoned myself at one point. I did food poison myself at one point because I left the seeds in the water too long. Anyways, so I went down that route, wouldn't eat anything cooked because I thought that was what I needed to do to feel better. I ended up doing cleanses like crazy. I mean, I think I did every cleanse that was at the health food store just because I wanted to feel better. And I ended up doing a 30-day cleanse and doing colonics with it. And that really messed up my hormones. And I think that's when my thyroid just decided to stop working. So everything kind of peaked about 6 years ago. I was living in Rhode Island at the time, and I was so sick. I had finally my body was like, you're done. Emotionally, I had overwhelmed myself. I had a lot of things going on in my personal life with my family and religion as well. So I started to deconstruct the religion I was brought up in, and my husband and I decided to exit that space. And that came with a lot of difficulties because a lot of family members couldn't understand why we were doing that. And with that came like a new sense of being, like this new part of myself that I didn't even know existed. And then I kept getting sick though. And then 6 years ago, I have a really great osteopathic doctor as well. And she was treating me, and she had just done a bunch of blood work for me, and the results came back. And I mean, like the list was like, it was so long. It was like I was pre-diabetic, which I think now they don't even say you're pre-diabetic. My adrenals were not working. My thyroid, Hashimoto's disease, came back at a top notch. I had, cardiac protein levels. My cardiac protein levels were so extremely high, like 3 times the amount that they should be. And she basically just said to me, Cindy, we've got to start. You got to start really diving deep into your health. I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I'm eating all the macronutrients. I'm counting all the calories. I'm like exercising, like, you know, I'm doing all the right things. And then, yeah, 6 years ago, it just like I had bronchitis, pneumonia, a urinary tract infection. I had a fever of 103. I was throwing up and I couldn't move. I remember we were in Rhode Island. I was driving around at 4 a.m. trying to find a doctor to help me because I was so sick. I came home and that's when, you know, I just hit rock bottom. My doctor was saying, like, we've really got to get on top of your health. I started to, I was into yoga, but I hadn't really like quite dove in that deep into it. So I decided to sign up for yoga teacher training. While I was doing my yoga teacher training, I started to go inward. And as I went inward, there was a lot of parts of myself that I didn't know I was not feeling. And towards the end of my yoga training, I guess a lot of people call it like a premature Kundalini awakening. I don't know. I think it was just the conditions all kind of met up in the perfect time. And I was doing this chakra aligning class, and I just had this most beautiful experience where I just felt so much light. I felt benevolence. I felt, well, now I know it's sattva. I think I finally felt sattva, which is something that I've learned in Ayurveda further, but I felt it, and it felt like the best feeling I've ever felt in my life. I felt relief from all the pain and suffering. I felt amazing. And I was kind of on this high for about 4 or 5 months. And I was so excited. I want to tell everybody about it. I was like, yoga's the answer, you know, and I was on this kick. And then shortly thereafter, I was at a wedding and a man walked in and I had a flashback. And this flashback sent me spiraling and shaking, and I didn't know what was happening. And my body started doing really strange things after that. So I kept having panic attacks that came back again. And they weren't like any of the other panic attacks I'd had previous. And it just started really rattling my nervous system and creating a lot of new feelings that I never felt before. So it was such like this contrast where I was like, wait, I'm getting on top of things. And then I was starting to feel better and like feeling really excited about what I was doing. And then this happened. And in the meantime, after I did my yoga teacher training, I had gone back to school to finish up my bachelor's degree. And while I was taking these classes, I was going to exercise physiology. I was taking psychology. And because it'd been like a 15-year gap, they told me I could keep all my classes if I could keep up. So I had to relearn all these pre-med courses. Like I had to relearn everything. And so it was like constant information, but I was loving it. And I had this new sense of understanding after this yoga training. So I was like seeing how everything was interconnected. And I was like, this is beautiful. Like, how come nobody's like understood this, you know? And I was so excited about it. And then my yoga trainer actually told me, she's like, you really should get into Ayurveda. And I remember the first time I learned about it, I was like, what? Like, this is overwhelming, but it was intriguing. And so after I got done with college, or after I got done with that semester, this was the same time that I started having these flashbacks. And that's when I found you. And so it's kind of the beginning of my journey of this trauma that I didn't know was hiding underneath all of these different layers. And I met Jess, and then we had this great conversation. I had just kind of come off this high of, you know, everything was connected, and we talked about cosmology, we talked about physics, we talked about anatomy, we talked about the earth, we talked about everything. And she's like, you're going to love Ayurveda. And so I jumped into her course, and I just breezed through the first part. It was just like, oh yeah, I totally get this. This is amazing. And I was just breezing through it. And then it got a little bit deeper. And the deeper we went into studying Ayurveda, the more I understood that I was not connected to my body. And I hadn't been connected to my body my whole entire life. I had been living from my head, from my thoughts, because anytime I felt into my body, my trauma was there. And so the more I studied Ayurveda and I saw how everything was interconnected and how the body is not separate from the mind, that they're both interconnected, that's when the real healing started to happen. And that was 5 years ago. And then I became your student, and it got a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And my flashbacks were coming faster and faster, and disassociation started to happen for me. And it got really bad. Do you remember this?
Completely. And
Yeah.
this is part of one of the tricky things about studying Ayurveda, because as we come to learn and understand the mechanics and the inner workings of things, of human physiology and health and disease and everything, it's almost impossible to not look at ourselves and ask, well, what's going on in me, right? That's a person's first kind of natural, innate response to it. All students do this.
I remember you telling us that, like, hey, if you can like hold off to the end of the semester, like try not to like take it so inward. And I was like, how can you not? You know, like it was so challenging because it was like starting to really register, and it was registering at such a deep level. And yeah, so I remember you saying that that semester, but you were so gracious with me, like so gracious with me. And I remember I had to take a pause. I was like, just let me take a pause. Let me figure this out. And you were so kind to let me take a pause.
Well, that's the best way for you. And you've gone through your own process. You've come back and studied again, and you've been practicing this for yourself and your family. And, you know, I think you of all people have embodied this in one of the maximum ways that I've seen out of a lot of people that I've worked with. So,
well, because it made sense. I think, like, you know, trying to figure out where I wanted to take my, you know, my profession and my career, it wasn't even about me healing. It was like, what did I want to study? Because, you know, I'd looked at integrative nutrition and, you know, a nurse practitioner or a DO or all these different avenues, but then I saw the limitations and that they didn't treat the whole body. And so when I met you, it was like, oh my gosh, like allopathic medicine's great, and there's a necessary part for it, right? But as far as like treating the whole body the way that you do, it's beautiful. I mean, I loved, like, just even, I mean, you know how hard it was for me to even just go to bed by 10. Like that was like and then it kind of takes these belief systems and you're like, whoa, I got to really look at them. And then when you look at these belief systems, you find out about the subconscious mind, and you're like, well, where did that all come from? You know? And so these rabbit holes I would go down, like you speak to this stuff, and I'm like, I got to figure out how to explain this in the Western terminology. So I had to like understand different brain waves and like, oh, you know, this kapha thing in the beginning of life, that's the theta brain, you know? And like, then I was like, wait, what did my theta brain experience? And I was like, oh, I was very traumatized. And so that's why healing has been so challenging, because as you, and I don't know, you can speak for this, but as you've helped me unlock these parts of myself that have been dormant, you know, that I don't know if you want to speak to that, if your observation of what I've gone through, I don't know.
Well, that's a super interesting side of it as well, to see it from actual practice in terms of just how deep some of this stuff goes. And I make this joke with students all the time now. Whenever we work with somebody, it's like that game show. Do you want what's behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? You have no idea.
No, I think we had like 10 doors to go through. I feel like I've gone through, so it's like I always tell people, I'm like, you know, like when you open up computer tabs and like you're like, oh, I don't want to forget that. I feel like I've got like 100 of them open up, and it's like, okay, I've got to keep them all open so I know which ones. But yeah, that's really what happened. And I think like when I was just your student, you know, I wasn't seeing you as a patient. When I was your student, I was trying to do some of these practices, just, you know, the daily routines, I guess. I know that's not the correct Sanskrit word, and I am the worst Sanskrit student of any of your students. I'm gonna blame that on being dyslexic and tongue-tied.
I think you even got your 7-year-old to remember the alphabet when you were studying it, so I wouldn't say you're the worst.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's true. But yeah, what was I lost my train of thought, but I got stuck on the Sanskrit thing. Oh no, but then so in my trauma, it was almost like, that yoga teacher training kind of like woke up the beast. And then Ayurveda was kind of taking away its supply. So it's like, oh, taking away the supply of how I lived my life, so to speak, so that the beast could come out to be healed. And I shouldn't call it a beast because it's really my inner child, but, and bless her heart, she's so sweet. But it's almost like Ayurveda was able to like peel back the layers. I don't know how to explain it, because it felt like it was like it internally like did something different to the way that my nervous system was processing my external world. Because it wasn't lining up with like my heart. It wasn't lining up with who I really was. And, you know, that's one of my favorite parts of Ayurveda, is really studying the mind. I mean, I understand like the body and the Panchamahabhutas and, you know, the elements that we're all made of. But then this other part of the mind and Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, that's my favorite. That has been my, like, I could study that all day long. Like my kids are even like, Mom, please take a break. And I'm like, oh no, I think I'm onto something, you know? And so it's just like Ayurveda has been so fun because there's so much to study and there's so many different parts of it that are helpful, right? And so as I studied more of like how this mind and this body came together, this junction, I realized that my abuse was right there. And for me, when I say abuse, it's because it happened in a non-verbal state, and I completely forgot it until 5 years ago. Completely forgot. And so I think that because I'm healing that junction, right? These memories that have been frozen are melting and they're being exposed. And there's a lot of amazing research now that's talking about how your body can hold on to something for years before it releases.
Yep. And books like The Body Keeps the Score are
Huge.
great examples of that. The effect of the imprinting of memories and emotions and feelings and sensations, that imprint into the fat tissue and into the structural sort of foundation of the body is so delicate, and it's so easy to stamp that in childhood years. And so for kids, you, Cindy, especially, and all the kids out there that suffer through childhood trauma, it can be a lifelong impact. And, you know, people need these tools. They need to learn how to bring that deviated state, like what you were talking about, that you're not really in sync with your heart. You're right. That's a deviation from our natural state of being. And in Ayurveda, that natural state of being is called one's prakriti, the baseline constitution. The deviation from that is the vikriti, a change off of baseline. And so whatever that discontinuity is, wherever it's high or low or however far away it is, we need to bring that back into its normal baseline alignment, so everything is tuned or running in sync together. And so actually, many of the things that you struggle with, everybody else who does this struggles with as well, is learning how to make those behavioral changes that allow that deviation to shrink and shrink and shrink until it comes back to baseline. And these are things like going to bed early or at a reasonable time, right? Being asleep by 10 p.m., lining your circadian rhythm up, eating at the right times, eating the right amounts.
Yeah, which was hard for me because that brought up that Ed. We'll call him Ed. But that's what brought that back up, was like, oh man, she's telling me to eat at times that my body's like, no, or my mind actually was like, we don't eat then, and we're not going to eat what she's telling you to eat. And so there was that resistance. I mean, like, talk about protector parts, they really like
big time.
Yeah, but then the formulas that you gave me were magic. It was like, it just made it easier. And I don't know if you could expand on that, because that is something amazing.
So the Ayurvedic formulations are pretty amazing, and they are, considered in India Ayurvedic medicines, but outside of India, we'll generally refer to them as formulations, and they're simply compounded, known compounds of one or more ingredients in some sort of base. And that base might be just the herbal dry powder, say the dry powder of something like ashwagandha as a root. Or they may be as complicated as formulations that are up to like 50, 60, 70, 80 ingredients cooked down into a liquid decoction. That's then added into a ghee. That's added along with more paste of other herbs and cooked down for some number of hours or even days in some cases. And so some of these formulations get into like extreme complexity realm, and how they figured out how to design them and how they were going to have that particular impact, we don't really know today. All we know is that this set of instructions to produce this outcome is supposed to have certain effects on human physiology. And so that's how we use them. And they are really powerful when they're used in the right person, in the right time of the year, in the right stage of the presentation, in the right degree of how strong, medium, or weak that presentation is showing up, and along with the context of whatever the diet and the lifestyle parameters are that are appropriate to help support the best outcomes with that. So it's a sum total holistic approach here. And it, you know, one of the hardest parts is what you experienced and probably what took the bulk of the time up front, the first 1 to 2 years of getting all those things lined up, getting the sleep lined up, getting the diet lined up, getting the schedule lined up, and fighting all these things that are natural to fight against because that's how you've known to live your whole life.
And fighting a lot of conditioning, like a lot of conditioning from my childhood, from my religion. And that was another thing. It felt like I was like, well, now I've got this other person that's like watching me and like, Cindy, what are you doing? I'm like, no, I already had a bishop. I don't need another one, you know? And so it was interesting because like, I love how you explain like the Verkuti and like coming back. And it was almost like, since I've met you, like, I kind of felt like I was just like all over the place. Remember? Like I was just cosmic girl. Anyways, but like, as I've slowly made this progress back to the space, I feel like right now I'm right here. And a couple of years ago, when I really started to see you more and more, is because these flashbacks were really rattling my nervous system. And it had a lot to do with the vagus nerve. And I love Stephen Porges's work and Peter Levine's and Gabor Mate. And there's so Ogden. I mean, I could go on and on about all of these frontiers of the West who are understanding the vagus nerve and what it does to help regulate the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And now, you know, with Ayurveda, we learn about the external world that comes in, you know, the periphery to our central nervous system goes to the limbic system, and then we execute, right? And so I had a lot of, what would you call them? Disjointed, I don't know, what would you call it? It wasn't working. It was dysfunctional. There we go. I had a very dysfunctional nervous system. And so like the more that we have brought myself, you know, you've helped me come back to this Prakriti, my nervous system's like, what are you doing? We're not safe. And so more and more flashbacks would come. And it got really, really bad. And my nervous system kept getting very rattled. And I kept having collapse states where the vagus nerve is really cool, where it has the ventral and the dorsal. And if you don't feel safe, and you know, you can go study that or whatever, there's great resources out there. But I kept going into this dorsal vagal response that was shutting me down. So it was making my heart beat really bad, like really deep and really fast. And then it would just stop. It was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. But that happened to me so many times that my nervous system was just always on high alert. I was this hypervigilance, just got out of control. And then I got diagnosed. I started having this pain in my head 2.5 years ago. And this is where I get emotional. But it got really bad. I got really scared. It's called trigeminal neuralgia. That's what the doctors call it. And I remember calling you crying, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. It was so painful. And it was about a month and a half. And that's when you and Tila were helping me so much and calling me every week and just getting me all these formulas and helping me. And I'm just like so grateful because it went away. Well, it didn't go all the way away, but it was dormant. And anytime it flares up, you're there to help me. And I'm really grateful because the prognosis of that and the treatment is it's not great. So, and then with that came more flashbacks, and then got the label of having CPTSD, which is different than PTSD, and I'm learning the difference still. CPTSD is different in that it's not like one event, it's like multiple events, so you keep reliving it over and over again. So like you have the trauma response and then it re-traumatizes you pretty much. And so that kept happening. And so 2 years ago, I don't know if we want to talk about psychedelics.
Absolutely. Why
Okay.
not?
Why not? So, Jess, you were helping me stabilize my nervous system, and it was working. It's just that just kept happening because, like you said, it was like the closer we got here, it was like more bigger and bigger flashbacks started happening because it had been so suppressed.
Yeah. And this is one important thing I'll just say real quick, is that it's very common as a person is trying to get out of their pathology. We can't just jump out and away from it. We have to go straight through it.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the tough part, And so this is why even in classical Ayurveda, it says good patients, meaning people who are going to be the best patients, they have good memory, they have the ability to communicate well, and they have the ability to withstand over and over again the difficulties that are going to come with treatment and going through the whole process, because it's not easy, unfortunately. And this is one of the hardest things, I think, for people coming into Ayurveda to kind of overcome, because it's totally different from the Western approach of, oh, you have this problem, take this pill, and all of your problems will magically disappear.
But we know that they don't. They just compound.
They go and they hide, and they come back later. And then people come to Ayurveda, and now we have more problems to deal with.
And I think that's what I loved about the situation that we have, is that I found you before all this stuff happened. It was almost like I was so grateful that I had a base knowledge already, because it kind of allowed me to be like, no, I'm going to keep going. And I think that's why I kept going, is because I had already felt the truth, and I'd already felt like, no, this is it. I've got to stick with this. And it has been it's been very hard. I mean, how many conversations have we had where I was bawling my eyes out? I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And you're like, you got this.
That's the thing, is your commitment level is unshakable. And when that's the case, we can almost guarantee that the person's going to get positive results.
I just hope I have a strong, is it Sarah?
Strong Sattva?
Oh no, Sarah, S-A-R-A or whatever.
Sarah?
Yeah,
that's more on the physiological side.
Okay, well,
it can also be for Sattva too, but yeah, having that plus all the other good aspects, all these things.
And I think along the way, like I definitely studied a lot of like how the mind is, and there's so many different modalities, right, about calming the mind and understanding duality and coming to the still point. And and as I've studied that, I've understood like the piezoelectric effect and quantum energy. And so it's like, it's beautiful. There's so much here, and it's so fun. I could talk about it for hours, but we're going to just jump forward to what's going on with me right now. So Ayurveda has gotten me here, and I've kind of been stuck a little bit. And so one thing that I bump up against a lot is allowing sattva to be felt, because part of my trauma is when I feel sattva, it triggers me. And I think that has to do with my abuse in the religion that I was born into, because I was abused by the elders, the men in charge. So there's a lot of spiritual abuse that is coupled with my sexual abuse. And so I just need a little bit of a stronger medicine, and that's why psychedelics is awesome. And that's coming, in the West, it's gaining traction. And so MAPS is a program. Do you want me to talk about MAPS, or is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is another beautiful example of how Ayurveda can complement so many other modalities. And you're a shining example of having learned so many different areas of science and Western and other holistic systems, and seeing how these things can complement and the synchronicities between them. And this is the essence of nature, the essence of life, is that there's different ways to get to the end goal that we want. And the person who makes that effort, like you have done time and time again, the only place they're going to get to is the result that they want. So
yeah, and I think, and psychedelics it's becoming such like it's out there. We all know, there's so many documentaries and books about it right now, and podcasts galore. I mean, Uberman talks about this. It's everywhere. So one thing I have seen, in my own environment is people take these, and it's almost like I always explain it like you're parting the Red Sea. And that default mode network, it's the thing that you get through your subconscious mind and you see what's really out there, and you're like, oh, I'm insignificant, but everything's so beautiful, and that's what love is, right? Like you're just embraced in love, and then the Red Sea kind of comes back, and you're like, wait a second. And I feel like what Ayurveda does is it allows you to I feel like for me, it's allowed this integration and a softer landing, so that I'm not just parting the Red Sea and then trying to go back and trying to figure out life and getting more confused, because I've seen that happen too. So I feel like with your help, it's like we can part the Red Sea, and then as it comes back, it can be a little bit softer, and we can keep doing this expansion, contraction, whatever, until we get to the place where we are in alignment with our fingerprint or our prakriti or whatever, right?
Totally. You've done a lot of work on the physical level and normalizing your physiology, getting your circadian rhythm linked up and in sync, and getting the right diet, getting the right schedules, all that kind of stuff. And so this is why the psychedelics became such a good option for you, because you needed that peak experience for your psychology to now break out of what it has known and what it has been for your whole life. And
exactly.
Right, experience the whole thing, and then to be able to come back in, like you're saying, and have that soft landing. This is the integration that I think is a huge piece needed for success.
Me
with
too.
Psychedelics.
Me too. And I feel like we're doing our own experiment right now, because I am getting MAPS they're the pioneers of MDMA with psychotherapy. And Rick Doblin's done a fabulous job, 2 decades of research. And I applied a couple of years, I guess it was a year ago. That was 2 years ago. I applied.
2 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's right. It was about 2 years ago. I just applied. I didn't think I would get in, because thousands and thousands of people were trying to get into the study. And then I got the call back, and I was like, whoa, wow, and then I kept getting callbacks, and I went through 10 screenings, and they're finally like, hey, you're one of 13 that got picked. And I was like, what? Like, this is for real? I couldn't believe it. And then I did it last summer, and unfortunately I got placebo. But that's okay, because whatever, everything's supposed to happen for a reason, right? And so I finished the study so that I could do the crossover, and that crossover has led me to where we're at right now. And I get my first MDMA treatment next Tuesday.
Congratulations, Cindy.
Thank you. I'm super scared, but I'm also really excited, because like you were saying that, that Vikriti, where I met you, I was right here, and, we've progressed. And I guess it's like the Western girl in me that doesn't have a lot of patience and wants to get on the freeway. And I'm just excited, because I know it's going to take me to that beautiful space. And then Ayurveda will continue to help me land, so that I can go forward and keep living with vitality, and I can thrive. I just want to thrive. I'm tired of just being in survival mode and being in this reptilian, or this amygdala. I'm ready for the space between my amygdala and my hippocampus to have a little bit more grace.
Beautiful. Well, this is what Ayurveda is ultimately meant for. Most people come for some specific kind of disease, especially chronic illness, similar to some of the stuff that you were experiencing. And then as we go through all this stuff, when we bring that person into their alignment, the next thing we want to look at is, now, how do we live our best life? How do we get into optimal experience here? And we need to make sure the psychology is ready for that. And when the psychology gets upgraded to be able to experience life in that way, is the body ready to support that psychology? Right? So to do one without the other is a huge challenge. And at least from this side, what we can do is I can point you in the right direction to say, okay, now you need to plug this in and try to work on this area of yourself, even if Ayurveda doesn't necessarily have the tools directly to do that today. We know that that's the area that needs to be worked on. And so this is a great example of how Ayurveda is, if it is a growing science, if it is a living science as it should be, as it has been for, who knows how many thousands of years, we have to keep bringing things into our framework and learning how to use the tools that are available today.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm like a living testament of it, because when I met you, I was on thyroid medication. I was a mess. And, we've been able to taper off that, and it's been amazing. My energy levels are there. I do still have flashbacks, but that's just because of the nature of what I've gone through. And it's because it's so fresh. Like, I had complete memory loss until 5 years ago. And so it's almost like I'm on this accelerated curve of learning. And I've tried ketamine. I did ketamine coupled with psychotherapy, and that was okay. But with what I've gone through, MDMA is supposed to just be the next thing that's going to help me get over that hump. And I'm just grateful, because I think Ayurveda has kept me healthy. I know it has. I know it's kept me healthy. I used to get multiple sore throats. Anybody that knew me in the past, we'd always joke, like, I was the lemon. I was like the queen of lemons. I was always sick, and I always had a sore throat. I always had some type of lung issue. Always had stomach aches, had diarrhea all the time. I really was always sick, and it was always just a joke. Always had teeth problems, sinus infections. You name it. But, I just kind of made fun of myself for it.
I remember that actually at the beginning when we first started working together, you were struggling to do a lot of kind of regular things. And then there was one day, I think you would email Tila and I or called us or something and said, hey, I put the skis in the car.
Yes!
It was like a huge achievement.
It was like I lost my strength. And so, you've been treating me, and I don't get sick anymore. I start to, and then I'm like, hey, Jess, I'm getting sick. And you're like, okay, here we do, and you are so amazing, because you've kept my body so that my mind can actually process this horrific trauma. Because the people at MAPS were like, when I got placebo, I was really upset. Like, actually, I was really, really upset. But they're like, well, you're like the top 1% of traumatized people in the nation. And I'm like, that doesn't make me feel better. Like, anyway, but I feel like because my body has been getting stronger, and the capacity for me to fill what I've needed to fill to get through it, because I have to go through it. That's the only way to do it, right? Otherwise, we're spiritual bypassing, which a lot of people are doing. And so the only way for me to heal this is to go through it. And so I feel like you have been able to really help strengthen my body and my mind to be able to emotionally go through what I'm about to go through.
Awesome. Hey, I have to say, I can give anybody the advice, but you're the one who's actually doing the work every day, Cindy. So really, thank you for maintaining that commitment. You're the one cooking every day, not only for you, but for your whole family.
I know, but it's working for my family, right? Like, it's crazy. After like a year, I'm like, hey, Jess, do you think you could get my family on board? Because they started noticing a difference in me. They started seeing that I was feeling better. And then, my husband started doing it, and then he started feeling better, and he's like, this is so crazy. I'm like, I know, right? And then my daughter started doing it, and she's like the only 18-year-old who's like drinking a freshly boiled hot water, and she loves it. She gets her friends to do it, and they're always like, wait, I actually do feel better now, and then my 16-year-old did it, and really watching him go through puberty, and you helping us, manage those hormones, and he's a different kid now. And then Bryn, my 13-year-old, started doing it, and then Grayson, when he was 7, he started, and now he's 9, and he knows now when he has the snot coming down, he knows he needs to drink some hot water. And it's just amazing, because they are starting to take care of themselves. They are learning to listen to their bodies. They are really starting to identify, if I eat this, I'm going to feel like that. And so they're taking responsibility for themselves. And I think that is a huge gift that Ayurveda gives us.
So beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful for you. I really am.
It's amazing to see these kids take to it so well too. And ultimately, one of my best teachers in India always used to say this to me, at the end of the day, all patients, they only want one thing, and that is relief.
Yes. I think yes, absolutely. We want to be able to live our lives with relief. Who wants to I don't want to pick suffering. No. I want to feel good. I want to have energy. I want to use the energy that I've got in a really, really great way. And I feel like Ayurveda really helps you use the things that are coming from here. And let's utilize this space and let's live more from here.
And that's exactly what one of the most important lines in the classical text says, Dharmartha Kama Mokshanam Arogyam Moolamuttamam. Good health or absence of disease is the root of all of the achievements that we want to make in this lifetime.
I love it when you speak Sanskrit. It's so pretty.
That's a favorite line.
It's true though. That is what suffering is, right?
Suffering is going to prevent everything that we could achieve or that we should be doing, that we want to be doing, and then ultimately that we're here, that we're supposed to be doing. And so this whole idea of personal responsibility and helping kids learn that at an early age, that is priceless.
Yes.
They're going to carry that through the rest of their lives and hopefully now learn how to apply it in other areas as well. And, it's exponential, the amount of good results that we receive when kids start this early on. Their whole trajectory of their life changes.
Well, and it's been amazing to me to see the impact of food and your mood.
Yes.
I feel like we could do a tagline.
Food and mood.
But it really is. Some of these sattvic meals that I've made or just the different cookbooks that I've gotten over the years, I'm hesitant sometimes. I'm like, is this really going to work? And then I make it for them and I watch them after dinner and I'm like, I notice them start to settle down. I'm like, wow, it really works.
So nice.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, that was a really long answer to the question about what you asked me in the beginning about what I loved about Ayurveda. All of it. I love all of it.
It was a perfect answer. Thank you.
Yeah, for reals. It's been a journey and it's not over yet.
No, it's going to just be starting as of next week.
I know, right? Yeah, it really is. So, I think the more I research too, how our body processes these psychedelics, I was just listening to Abraham talk about psilocybin in particular, and just about how what it does with serotonin, and how our body adapts to obviously these substances, but there needs to be a way for our body to recover. And I'm excited to see how Ayurveda plays into how I recover from MDMA, because it does, the serotonin spikes and then the dopamine and the norepinephrine. That does it does stuff in your body, right? Your organs are gonna adapt to that. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that.
It's going to give you that, neural hormone boost, and obviously that intense mood boost while it's active, and then your body's going to come back down, and it probably, and I can't speak to this as well as they would be able to, but I would guess it's going to try to regulate back to where it was. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't want to go back to exactly where you came from, then you have to have that plan in mind of, well, now when I come out of this, where am I going? What do I want? And so maybe, as part of your
experiment, right?
Exactly. As part of your journey, you keep asking yourself that.
Yeah. And maybe we have another conversation in a couple of weeks and see where we're at and keep doing this, right? And see what happens and how it all incorporates. And I don't know, it's exciting. I'm excited. I feel like I'm excited. It's been a long journey. It's been a lot of tears and a lot of tears, but I'm excited.
Yeah, you've really lived a much more exciting life, I think, than most people would want to have to bear. But
I'm smiling through this, and maybe it's out of nerves or whatever, but in all seriousness, what happened to me wasn't right. And It wasn't right, and it wasn't my fault. But unfortunately, I have to suffer the consequences of someone else's actions. And I could either play the victim the rest of my life, or I love the drama triangle. Have you heard of the drama triangle? And I think the victim ends up becoming the creator in their story. I'm pretty sure.
There's three people. I don't remember the exact
It's the
names.
victim, the perpetrator, and then
The savior or something.
Yeah, the hero. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I think the victim ends up becoming the creator. And so I'm just excited to create from a space that's not backloaded with so much fear. And I think that's the part of myself that I'm really excited to just transmute, is this fear that sometimes I describe as it just feels like it's everywhere inside of me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited to feel love and not be afraid of love. And I want my body to not fear love anymore. And so I'm just excited. I think I'm gonna feel things that I haven't felt yet.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
That's wonderful, Cindy. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So anyway.
The next level is upon you.
Yes, it is. And I'm so excited that you're going to stay on the roller coaster with me, right?
I can't wait to hear the results. You feel free to call me while you're there if you want.
Right. Exactly. So I'm really grateful.
Need any company.
Yeah. So here's to Ayurveda and to see what comes next, I guess.
Awesome. All right. Well, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. And thank you for having me and for interviewing me. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm excited to see where you go. I'm excited to see all the lives you change. And I know you've already changed so many. And you're brilliant. Like, really, you're brilliant. Smartest person I know. And you're super nice too, which is crazy. Like, you don't get smart and kind, and you are both of those.
Well, thank you, Cindy. That's very sweet. Thank you for sticking with this and spreading wonder and joy and health to everybody you know.
And through all of it, I am now an Ayurvedic health coach. I may not be able to speak perfect Sanskrit, but I can definitely explain a lot to you.
It's that practical side that's the hardest part for most people, is making those first couple steps and getting through the first couple months of adaptation to being living in life in a whole new way.
Yes.
A whole
100%.
paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll keep the conversation going, and hopefully we'll do this again once you're back and settled.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, you feel like you're in your new groove. Let's see how you're doing, all right?
Dude, let's do it day after. Why not? No, let's not. But yes, definitely. Let's definitely catch up again.
Whenever you're ready, let me know.
Okay, sounds good.
Wonderful. All right, great, Cindy. Thanks. We'll talk again soon.
All right, see you later.